flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Mr. McCausland, will you please take roll?
Mrs. Feiss.
Here.
Mr. Grisbeck.
Here.
Mrs. Hoppy.
Here.
Mrs. Janasek.
Here.
Mr. McGregor.
Here.
Mr. Modrak.
Here.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
Mrs. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
All 9 members present.
Thank you. For the first item on the agenda, Mr. McCausland, I think you're going to walk us through the proposed final budget.
I am. Okay. Tonight is presentation of the proposed final budget. Sorry, adjusting it so the people at home can see. I'll start like I always start with proposed final budgets. This still can change in the next 30 days before final approval. So your approval of this budget next week does not lock in the millage rate. It does not lock in any of the numbers. It is just what we're proposing at this point. Changes can and will be made from now until you do the final approval in June, and that's when you will establish the tax rate for next year. Okay? So with that preface, I always start by trying to give you a projection of where we think we're going to end up this year. On this slide, you can see that the budgeted numbers for revenues and expenditures and where we're estimating to come out at the end of the year. You can see that we right now are projecting that our revenues will fall slightly short, as will our expenditures. We had originally budgeted for a $642,000 loss this year. We're probably going to be a little shy of that. Right now I'm projecting us at slightly over $500,000 short. So it is a positive variance when you look at the net change in fund balance, but it's still a dip in your fund balance. So we are looking, and we constantly update those estimates, but right now that's where we look to be. So you started with a beginning fund balance of $24.5 million. You're going to end up just slightly over $24 million at the end of the year. Again, the revenue variance is really looking at lower EIT collections than we had anticipated, and delinquent tax collections are slightly lower, as well as our state and federal subsidies that we anticipated. On the expenditure side, we are seeing some savings especially in the employee benefits. We did a lot of analysis this year with our utility companies and communication companies. Mr. Slezak helped me tremendously doing the Spyglass audit that you authorized. So there were a lot of savings that came out of that. We also continue to do really well with insurance claims and our workers' comp. Our mod is going to finally drop below 1, which is very positive. I don't know how much you know about workers' comp mods, but 1 is typically the average, which means you as a district are paying pretty much what you should be paying for the size of your district, the number of employees. If you're above 1, you're paying basically a premium. So let's say your mod was at 1.25, you're paying about 25% more than you probably should for premium. Next year our mod is going to be below 1, which means you're probably getting a discount on your rate rather than you're paying a little less than what an average company would for your size and volume. So that's a positive as well. We also have savings in the area of supplies and software costs as well. Questions about where we're expecting to end up this year? And you can ask questions through this. If you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. This is where we stand right now for the next fiscal year. Right now, I gave you where we were in February. We're at about $3.78 million deficit. That deficit got as high as $4.5 million as we were manipulating the budget. But at preliminary budget time, you were $3.78 million in the hole. Right now, today, we're utilizing fund balance of slightly over $1 million. So your revenues your expenditures are exceeding your revenues again. This does represent an increase in spending over the current year actual estimates of 6.5%, and an increase, if you take out the additional ESSERS fundings, the increase is about 5.3%. Again, no big surprise here. Your primary increases are in personnel costs. We have substantial investment for next year in books and software. And as you know, we took on additional debt, including the Still Center debt that we anticipate, which increases your debt obligations by slightly over $2 million for next year. When you look at the tax assessment and the millage proposed for next year, PD's index for Bethel Park is 4%. This budget does include a maximum increase at 4%, or an increase of 0.9009 mills. The revenue that is generated by this is about $2.37 million. We did have some tax assessment increase. That tax assessment increase was just under 1%, 0.9%, which did generate additional revenue of $557,000. For Bethel Park, 1 mill generates about $2.58 million. And just in the way of homestead exclusions, the median household income right now for Bethel Park is $153,800. Or the median household assessment is $153,800. Tax on that median household would be about $139 increase. Here are some millage scenarios for you. If you did nothing, your millage would stay the same, but you would have a deficit in your budget of $3.35 million. And then you can see what happens as you increase the tax increase over time, or over percentage-wise. I don't think I need to read all that to you, but the tax increase that's listed here is the tax increase that you would see on the median household of $153,800. Here's your millage rate history. I know we've done this a million times, but you do see that you had no tax increase from 2015-16 for 4 years. Then you cut taxes by 1.8, almost 2 mils. And then for the last 2 years, we've been increasing that slowly, again, proposing another increase for next year. This 23.4281, which is proposed, finally puts you above where you would have been back in 18-19, or clear back to 15-16. So you're just now getting back to the 15-16 number.
Mr. McCausland, I
Yes.
guess maybe to the administration, when we're looking at a $1 million deficit, because we don't have the CARES, a lot of the funding we got from, through the whole COVID pandemic, we're looking at $1 million deficit. And if the common level ratio comes back unfavorable, and, we don't really know what that's going to impact, but it's only going to make the situation worse.
Correct.
Do we have an idea, do we have a scenario of what we would cut to get this to, oh, it's coming up? Okay. Okay, good.
You're always thinking.
I was just teeing it up.
Teeing it up.
Yeah.
Teeing it up.
Softball. Yeah, thank you.
Again, these should be nothing new to you or anything surprising. This just basically shows that the majority of your revenue come from local taxes. Your budget is largely funded by $68 million worth of tax revenue, and then followed by state, federal, and then other sources. These have been your trends with revenue over the past several years. The blue columns represent what was budgeted. The orange columns represent what was actually received. You can see in most of those years, your revenues have exceeded by your budget. Ideally, you don't want the gaps between the orange and the blue to be that severe. This year, we're trending a little bit the opposite way, which isn't great either, but you want those percentages to be pretty close. You don't want the differences to be that large. That means you're doing a fairly good job of hitting your budget numbers and you're budgeting well. It means you're not under you're not overtaxing your residents if you're coming closer to that number. The expenditures by operational area, the largest amount of your expenditures and the majority are spent in this blue area, which are direct instructional expenses, and then the orange area, which are directly supporting the educational programs. So obviously, this is not unique to any school district, but the largest portion of your budget goes to instructional and support services that directly support instruction. The rest of it is basically your athletics and your non-instructional programs. The real thin yellow piece there is your capital projects, and the lighter blue or aqua color is your debt service payments, and that piece of the pie has grown, obviously. It's about 9 or 8% of your budget right now. Here's the trend on your expenditures. Again, you want these numbers to be fairly close. The blue column is what you budgeted. The orange column is what you actually expended. You don't want usually this orange column to get above the blue column. That means you overexpended your budget, but you also don't want these gaps to be too large, because that means that you had money in your budget that you were planning to expend that you really didn't need to expend. So, we want to keep those gaps fairly close. You're never going to hit them on, because there's no way I can foresee everything that's going to happen. But when they get closer, we know that we're doing a fairly good job of budgeting pretty well. The budget certainly has got tighter over the last year. I think the process that we go through now has lent itself to really thinking about what belongs in that budget and what doesn't belong in that budget, and leads to some discussions about, if we're going to have a new program, what are the costs surrounding that program. This is your expenditures just another way, broken down by the type of expenditure it is, rather than by the instructional area. The large blue section in here is personnel. So yes, the people make up the majority of your costs. It's not unique to school districts. It's pretty much any company you work in, followed by your professional services, property services, and on around. The light blue column here is your supplies, your books, your software. The green is your equipment, and the dark blue is your debt service. Or no, I'm sorry, the brown is your debt service. Actually, these both kind of make up your debt service, because some of it's interest and some of it's principal, so it shows up in two different wedges. Here are your major expenditures broken down by numbers. Again, personnel makes up 73% of your budget, or slightly over 73 million. And then you can read down the list. Debt is next at 8.6 million. Supplies, books, and software, 4.3 million. Tuition costs, these are tuitions paid to students placed in outside placements and charters and cyber charters, 4.1 million. That is up from prior years and continues to be higher than typical. Professional services, $4 million. I broke it down a little bit more by special ed, subs and social workers, legal tax audit, and so on. Utilities make up about $1.7 million. Repairs, telecom services, and other services are $1.2. Equipment, slightly over $1 million. Most of that equipment is technology equipment, but we have another slide that breaks it down for you. Capital projects, some of that money is still ESSER's money that's still left over, but we do have a couple capital projects planned in the budget for next year. One of them is your restroom concession stands at the practice fields at the high school campus. That's about $400,000, and there's $30,000 in there right now for replacement of playground equipment at Memorial Elementary.
I have a question. Can I interrupt you real quick? So the tuition, does that include Steel Center?
Yes, that's Steel Center as well. You're welcome. And then transportation, the majority of our transportation is in-house, so we pay a lot of personnel costs. You'll find those up under personnel, but this transportation costs are for some outsourcing, insurances, other things like that, repairs to vehicles, and so on. Just a little highlight on personnel and where it stands. We did have 12 teacher retirements. 10 of those positions will be filled, but you do save money when you don't fill positions, and you also save money when a higher paid teacher retires and you hire a level, step one teacher. The savings for that is just slightly over $1 million for next year. We still do have 2 ESSERS funded positions in the budget. Those are in there. I'm not sure what direction we'll end up in the next month. We'll have to decide how we want to proceed with those positions. There were 6 paraprofessional retirements. 4 of those positions are filled in the budget. The savings there is about $135,000. We had 5 bus and mechanic retirements. All 5 of those were filled, but there was still a minimal savings of $35,000. We had 2 custodial retirements. Only 1 of those positions were filled. Savings there was just over $68,000. We do have some changes of status built into this budget. One of them, our current auditorium coordinator is resigning. So we eliminated that position and reworked it. The new position is going to be an audio-visual technical supervisor. They'll have many of the same responsibilities that your current auditorium coordinator had, but it will add to those responsibilities so that they can service other areas in the district. There are 2 part-time secretaries. One of them is in the special ed department. The other one is in the transportation department. We'd like to move them to full-time status. The workload has increased significantly in both of those departments, and we feel that that increase is merited. We did have 1 half-time teacher in the budget moved to a full-time status. So all of those things are currently in the budget. In the way of special ed costs make up about 15% of your budget, or slightly over $15 million. And there you can see the breakdown. Again, the largest portion is personnel, and then we have professional services for anything from social work to a lot of testing services, those types of things, AIU services, and so on. There is a number of tuition costs in there for students that are placed in private and charter placements.
One question on the
Sure.
special education costs. When we look at personnel, is that professional staff only, or is that also?
That's all your
also-
professional teachers, your
Paras.
administrators, your paraeducators, anyone
Okay, so
tied to
it's
special
anybody
ed.
involved in
Yeah,
special education.
yeah. Here are your equipment purchases in the budget currently. As you know, we started leasing technology equipment about a year ago. This is, I think, our 3rd technology lease. I think after 1 more, we'll probably be on a solid rotation schedule, so your debt should become pretty level in your budget at that point. But we'll be purchasing laptops, projectors. There's some capital software purchases in there, some white glove service that goes along with those. I believe there is a motion on next week's agenda. You'll see it on the agenda tonight about doing the lease for this technology equipment because we want to get that approved so we can get it ordered so we can have it here in time. But this is the next step in those replacement cycles so that your technology stays up to date and doesn't ever get to be 12 years old or so on. We do have cameras in this budget as well. We know that I worked with Mr. Slezak again, and we determined what type of system will work best and manage best into the future for us. Gives us some flexibility as we're going to be realigning buildings into the future. So we do have money, a little over $90,000 in there for cameras. And then you have some science, tech ed, musical instruments. There is some money in there for security uniforms and weapons. There's an upgrade of the LED lighting replacements in the auditorium. We did a phased-in approach to those lighting replacements, so this is the final phase of those replacements. We did some of them last year and the year before, so this is the final year of getting all those things updated to LED. There is some maintenance equipment in there. They're requesting a UTV for the maintenance department as well as a new mower for the maintenance department. There's also a box trailer to be replaced for the band use, and then some soccer goals and treadmills at a couple of the schools. Questions about that?
Does this come out of the the budget that you've set up, or does this come out of, the capital fund?
This all comes out of the general fund.
The general fund, okay, so this is included in.
This
the
included in the budget.
99 million.
That's
that
correct.
we've got, okay.
These are your trends with fund balance for the past several years. In 14-15, you had a balanced budget. You ended up adding to your fund balance slightly. And then again, the blue is where you budgeted. In 18-19, you planned for a decrease in fund balance, but again, you saw a substantial increase in your fund balance. And then the following 2 years, you had very significant, like over $5 million worth of deficits in your budget. But you didn't see, usually, you saw a small decrease in 1920 and you saw an increase in 2021, which was last year. I think those were the result of COVID and coming through COVID and not having as many expenses as you had anticipated to have. And you also had a lot of additional revenue that came in through ESSERS and CARES. So that really helped you get through those difficult budget years or cycles. In the current year, we had planned for a deficit. We're projecting right now that you will have a deficit, but it's slightly lower than what we had anticipated. And currently, obviously, in the year that's being proposed, you have another budgeted deficit planned as well. Here are your breakdown of your fund balance designations in the current year. Right now, we have $4.5 million in unassigned fund balance, which can be used for any unanticipated expenditure. By code, that number cannot exceed 8% of your expenditures. We're just around 5% right now with that number. Non-spendable are your prepaid healthcare and inventories. That's slightly over $1 million. It's already been committed. You have board action to commit certain funds. First one was for a legal trust. You have money held there for settlements that were made in different legal cases. You also have money set aside for retiree severances, retiree benefits, and for capital projects that have not been transferred to the capital reserve fund. It could be transferred at any time, or it can be held here, and you have the flexibility then to change the commitment as you need to. And we had quite a lengthy discussion last year about this, I think in June, when we did those commitments. Right now, you have assigned fund balance for future replacement of band uniforms for $45,000.
So now with the new contract, we have, new healthcare plan. I think we made some changes to how retiree healthcare, like at the family level, is compensated. Are we in a position to reevaluate how much we've assigned to the retiree benefits?
Yeah, it is something we'll look at, and I think I have a slide later that talks about the one of the ways you could deal with your deficit is to use some of this fund balance that's been set aside for those purposes. That's why it's there.
Yeah.
So you could bridge the gap.
And we're confident that our potential obligation is decreased, because of some of the changes to the contract. That'd be good with it.
They won't decrease in the next 3 years because you have certain incentives in there because you need staff to retire as you consolidate buildings. But certainly the potential will be there after that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So here's the budget deficit at a little over $1 million. And like I just mentioned, you could utilize your fund balance. Right now, retiree severances are about $171,000. Retiree benefits in the budget are about $461,000. And I mentioned those two capital projects, which are about $430,000. So if I go back to the previous slide, you have $500,000, $7.4 million, and $10.2 million sitting there that you could draw from to pay those line items in your budget. If you did that, those numbers exceed this $1 million. So you would be able to basically have a balanced budget if you were going to use your fund balance to pay for those items. Probably the least painful of your decisions. You could, and I've just given you some other options. I'm not recommending anything here. I'm just throwing them out there because I know that you'll want to see options. You could eliminate the two ESSERS funded positions. That would save you about $170,000. currently we have security positions for all the schools as we intended in the budget, but we have not been able to fill all those positions. We could reevaluate whether we want to fill those vacant positions or not. If you did not, that would save you about $142,000. Again, not recommending it. I'm just saying that's an option. You could not create the AV tech supervision position, and we could look at, there's a typo there. We could look at trying to staff the auditorium in a different way. We're not sure as administration that's the best option for the amount of things that go on in the district's auditorium, but if you chose to do that, there's about a $79,000 savings there. We could cut equipment purchases for those particular items that I listed. That's another $100,000. Currently, there are 8 social workers in this budget. I think special ed can speak to the fact that they've had an increased need for social and emotional needs. We are funding the majority of those social workers with access money, ready to learn money, ARP ESSERS money, but we could, go back to 4 social workers instead of 8. There's a savings there. Again, not saying that's the best thing to do, but it's an option. And there are potentials to eliminate several support positions and could generate as much as $428,000 in savings.
It seems like the line items are there to go to the committed funds.
That's why I put it up at the top. They are
And
there.
that's
That's why they're
actually-
there. That's why you put that money
That's
away.
actually almost $36,000 more than we need.
Right. It exceeds the deficit.
And it's there for that purpose.
It is. That's why I put it there.
I guess the other point is that we don't have a sustainable budget then. We're gonna be in the same position next year. We're still gonna
You will be.
We're gonna be probably more than $1 million in the hole next year.
Right.
So in some ways, it does make sense to have this view of, and I think it's great that you identified what we could cut, but, we're gonna draw out $1 million, and we're gonna be further behind next year. And so I think maybe the best thing is to kind of try to take out half of our deficit and only fund half of it, and I don't know what all this totals up to, but,
Again, you have the limit of being able to only raise taxes so much. So there's got to be a way to eventually eliminate that deficit over time.
yeah. It's gonna increase next year if we do.
It will.
do nothing to address it this year. It's gonna be higher, even higher next year.
Correct.
So these ESSERS positions, 170, I thought that was money that we got. Is that like a half-funded position or?
No, they're funded through ESSERS, but if you don't use the ESSERS money to fund those positions, it can be shifted to cover other costs that are sitting in the budget that aren't being funded by ESSERS right now.
Okay, okay.
It would require Ms. Wells to do a budget amendment, which she loves to do.
I think based on some conversations that Mr. Modrak and I heard today in the Safety and Security Committee, I am not willing to cut the security budget. There's too many
Yeah.
holes.
Yeah. I think like the AV Tech supervisor position, I think we discussed that a couple years ago as a way to generate revenue from, renting out our facilities. Obviously.
It
COVID
does
happened.
generate revenue. I think where we've seen the shortfall is obviously because of COVID.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to have events. So you're paying for someone to manage an auditorium that could not host events.
Right.
So our hope is, yes, that will pick back up and that we will have enough rental revenue to cover the cost of that person and then still make money.
Okay.
We still have work to do on this, and I think there might be other options that crop up as well. I was going to suggest, not that you want to have another meeting, but we may want to have a finance meeting sometime between this, next week and when we finally adopt the budget to kind of go into it a little more detail with options and things like
So
that.
If you could think about, yeah, like, let's say we're gonna cut the deficit, partially by, actually cutting some of these costs. And by the way, I don't wanna do all the talking, so if anybody else wants to talk, please, chime in. It may be up to half of it through the fund balance, but I think there's a third thing we should look at also. I think we have over like 100 students that are in charter school in the district. And if I looked at the fast facts, it's something like 130. And that may be a year ago. I don't know if it's this current calendar year, but that was published by the state. In terms of number of students, like about 3 or 4 times higher than, say, Upper St. Clair, Mount Lebanon, and, Peters and those schools. That represents about $1.5 million of money that we're paying out. So I think it'd be reasonable to look at the other side of the equation, not just cutting costs, but how do we bring revenue back into the district? Is that something that we could do, to have a, campaign to call around, call those parents, try to talk people into coming back? Because, that's the easiest money. That's the easiest way to balance the budget, okay? Without any harm to the educational model or anything like that. Seems like that's something we should be attacking very aggressively.
Okay. So again, this is just a summary, and then I kind of reallocated if we were to use those items for fund balance as committed, how it reduces it, what it looks like as far as assigned, committed, non-spendable, and unassigned. Okay. I did want to quickly just highlight a couple of the other funds, because I think when you do budgeting, you should look at all of your funds, not just the general fund. Your capital reserve fund, this is where you started about $9.7 million this year, and I listed for you the earnings and the expenditures from the current year. We're expecting to decrease that fund balance by $760,000. So that'll leave you just under $9 million at the end of the year. And you can see how it's committed. A little over $900,000 has been committed for turf replacements. We maintain $826,000 for bus replacements. And right now we have $267,000 in there for future paving projects. That does not obviously cover the bus garage project, but we know we're going to have other paving needs down the road. The high school is going to eventually need some work, so we started putting money aside for that. It still leaves you about just under $7 million to do for other future projects. Right now, in next year's budget, this is what we're anticipating. Starting with the 8.9, we do have some interest earnings in there. We plan to transfer in $200,000 from the general fund to build back some of that fund balance. That could be higher if we wanted to move more of that money that's been designated in your general fund committed for capital projects. Again, I will contend that it gives you more flexibility right now, leaving it in the general fund, because you can uncommit that and assign it to other areas. And right now, since you're in such flux with what you're going to do with building projects and debt service and so on, you may need to use some of that to bridge some of the gap moving forward. Right now, we anticipate the bus garage project to be about $1.7 million. Architectural services bus replacements that have already been ordered. So we're looking to spend that down by just under $2.4 million, which would leave you an ending fund balance of 6.5. So at some point, we'll want to start building that back up as we start to build long-range capital plans and projects for the future. But we know in the near future, since you're renovating the middle school, your high school is now 10 plus years old, but you're building a new K-5 facility, you're probably not going to have huge capital projects in the near future, at least for the next 5 years or so, but you will probably start to have some needs at the high school soon.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's something where we should be thinking about. I don't know if, we should have an, estimate by, architectural firm or something, just to kind of give us some guidelines. Because I think that's an area that we should be self-funding. We don't want to go out for another bond to renovate the high school, but just to kind of get an idea of what is it that we need to renovate, start putting that money aside, because it should be our goal that, that's self-funded, not.
Yeah, and we started a lot of that with the high school and the other buildings when we were doing the facilities master plan. So we have a lot of that in place. And actually, we were going to partner with SiteLogix on some of that because they have a software program that will help us do some of those projections and cost estimates. So we've kind of backed off it a little because we're trying to get the middle school project up and going. But certainly that's something that they have offered and we're probably going to investigate doing. And then finally, this is where your fund balance commitments in the capital reserve would end up at the end of the next year. Your construction fund, which is your IMS project funds for phase 1 and phase 2, we're going to estimate next year's beginning fund balance is slightly over $40 million. Yes, you borrowed 42, but we're going to be spending some this year. So I just started with where I think you're going to be at the start of the next school year. There's some interest earnings. The costs for phase 1 are in there, and we'll probably get into part of phase 2. I just kind of did a rough estimate of where I think we'll be, because if they bid that in late spring or so on, I don't know when. Do you know when they're planning to bid that? I don't remember.
Yeah, it's going to be in the fall.
In the fall, okay.
Phase 2.
So we might end up having to adjust that and increase that a little bit, but the funds will still remain in the construction fund, and that is purely for phase 1 and phase 2 of your IMS project. We'll keep you up to date, and we'll report on those on a monthly basis. We do also have a small scholarship fund. There's about $203,000 in there. Well, we're expecting about $189,000 after we award scholarships this year in that, so just under $200,000.
Mr. McCausland,
Yeah.
in years past, that interest has been higher. Is that,
It's just
Is
the
it
factor
going
of
to be
interest rates
concerning?
are so low.
is it going to get to be concerning based on, I know one of those scholarships is we can only use the interest on it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a concern, but there's still quite a substantial amount of funds there. Hopefully, you're going to see the market turn around. You'll gain some more interest on that money. So, but if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
I know, I'm just saying that it's down again. I
Yeah.
mean, this is going to be the second year in a row that
Right.
that.
I agree.
I'd rather
So-
interest rates stay low, so we can borrow low, and we'll kick in the money for the.
Where you find that one?
Just in the way of next steps, the budget will continue to change again until final adoption in June. We have to continue to evaluate staffing numbers and retirements. I am working on long-range projections, so that should help you with some of your planning as far as capital projects and just long-range costs. And then, like we talked about, we'll be looking at, when I look at staffing, we'll be looking at where we think staffing is going to go in 3 years when we consolidate. Capital projects and construction budgets will also be presented, which I did some tonight. We'll give you a little more detail. I think we probably should have a finance committee meeting at some point. But again, we'll be adopting the final budget and the millage rates in June. Questions? I do have, I would like, if you don't mind, we have just a few slides. Sharon Copey pretty much manages most of the cafeteria fund, and her and Joe Consolmagno are here tonight to give you a brief outline of the cafeteria food service fund.
Good evening. This is working. Joe and I put together a couple slides just to show you where we expect to be ending this year. You can see last year we ended up with a loss. This year we are projecting to have a profit. But I want to preface that by saying that this was a unique year with COVID. The waivers that were in place during COVID were extended for another year, which meant that everybody received a free lunch, which meant our reimbursements were very, very high. And then mid-year, the state tax, federal government attached on another 25 cents in addition to that, which meant the reimbursements went up again. Those waivers are, as of today, set to expire on June 30th. And the only thing that can change that is if there's some new congressional action that takes place. So the Met's budget is based on the fact that we're going to go back to a regular school year operating under the National School Lunch Program, where in order to receive a free and reduced lunch, you'll have to fill out an application, or the students are going to have to go back to paying. So, with that being said, the participation was, through the roof for these 2 years, which accounts for the profit. Along those lines, in the past, the cafeteria was not able to fund itself, so we had to take money from the general fund. In past years, you can see we started the year with the $479,000 deficit. With the year that we had with the reimbursements, we're going to end up extinguishing that fully and ending up with a receivable from the general fund of the $293,000. So that's a good thing. This slide here is based on the budget that Met's put together. You can see that they are projecting a loss. Now, once again, they had to go back and use participation levels from pre-COVID to base these numbers on. The other thing is that the federal reimbursement rates do not come out until midsummer, so we think that they're going to go up, but we have no way of knowing. So I'm going to let Joe talk about this a little bit and the reasons why we're going to end up with this loss.
Thank you, Sharon. As everyone knows, inflation is up 7%. I mean, that's what's driving the expenses this year or for next year. So we could fund it in one of two ways, either by increasing the lunch prices or by taking it out of the general fund. But that 7% is tough to handle. And that's basically what's driving the negative cost there. I think the next slide shows how we compare in pricing with the other school districts and what we're proposing for what you can look at there. So, okay.
If you look at the previous slide,
So are you looking for a recommendation on how we cover those
Yes.
inflationary costs?
This slide here shows for every nickel that we would increase these prices, we would end up netting at $12,000 in income. So what we're proposing, which would be on the next slide, would be a 20-cent increase to offset the loss. So the prices on the bottom, where it says BP proposed, would be the new prices that we would charge. And then this is compared to the data we were able to find from Upper St. Clair, Peters, and Mount Lebanon. Or you can see Upper St. Clair has not made a decision yet. Peters is not planning to increase, and Mount Lebanon has already increased their prices by 10% going into next year. So this would be one option if you don't want to fund a deficit through the general fund, would be to increase the prices by 20 cents.
So how do you want the response from us? Does this come through in a motion on Tuesday, or?
We'll probably either put it on the agenda next week or we'll hold it till June. Do you want it next week? Yeah. Okay, so it'll be in a motion on the agenda next week.
Okay.
But
I don't know what the recommendation of the rest of the board is, but I think inflationary costs are things that you have to keep up on. Otherwise, like if you have a 7% increase and you try to defer that and absorb that, and let's say inflation is 7% next year, then all of a sudden you're in a 14% deficit. And it's hard to reclaim that in 1 year. You're always behind. Yeah. And I think, my belief, I'm not an economist, but, my belief that, a lot of these prices, they're not going to come down, okay? Of course, you have things like oil that fluctuates, but, some of these costs, I don't see them coming down. I think they're going to stay. So I wouldn't want to get behind the cost curve or the expense curve that we have here. So I would say that we should increase prices, but I don't know what other people's.
My question is the reduced lunch, not the free lunch, the reduced lunch. How does that affect the 20 cents? We're not putting that on the family, would we? That would be,
Kim, that's set by the federal government. That stays the same, that
oh,
40
okay.
cents.
Just
Yeah,
making
this-
sure that that cost would not be inflicted on.
Right.
Okay.
No, that stays the same. The only thing we're discussing here are the paid meals.
Okay.
That's the only thing that we can, the district
was
can control.
More seeking clarification. So it's the child that just walks through the lunch line every day. Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to add with the budget is that it will get posted on our website. It will be available for the public to view there or to come into the administrative offices for the next 30 days prior to the final adoption of the budget. And also, for the public tonight in board docs, it'll get posted on our website as well, are the line items with the numbers rather than just the slides. But we'll post both of them to the website tomorrow.
Doug, can you clarify that you do not have anything in the general fund to go to cafeteria next year?
I do not currently have anything in the general fund to go to the cafeteria. That would be a transfer that'd have to be added.
So, Dr. Jansanti, you're going to talk about busware.
Yes. So have a real brief presentation, and really what we're looking for is is a consideration from the board. Is this something you want us to pursue? Sorry, my computer timed out here. Worked closely with Mr. Zeeler from the Transportation Department. Also, Mr. McCausland was involved with some of the review of the presentation. So let me give you a little bit of background about, why. So we reviewed several bus following applications, and we reviewed and considered them. Busware came out on top because it works best with our current BusBoss transportation software. So we provided, Mr. Zeeler had provided a couple buses with some of the GPS application from Busware. We did trial runs, and basically Mr. Zeeler was pretty pleased with the results. In other words, did it work? Did it work very well? Did it work well with our software that we have for scheduling buses? And the answer was yes. Busware happens to be obviously another consideration, was most cost-effective application that we found that actually works with our system. You can see Busware is pretty across the country and really in a couple other areas beyond the U.S. So why? Why would we want to provide this service for parents, for guardians? Basically, we've been struggling. This past year, it was evident with our bus driver shortage. It forced the district to combine regular bus runs. And when you do that, it makes it become very irregular as far as, every day my bus should drop off at a certain time. Well, that doesn't happen when you start combining runs. And then, COVID on top of that would hit us, weekly, daily. Some drivers would be knocked out. So a combined run is now changed to a different run. And it caused a lot of angst, and really parents, I think, were frustrated at times because we had bus runs really arrive at the elementary level almost 30 minutes behind schedule at times. So it was pretty significant. With this app, parents will be able to see the exact arrival time, the ETA, and the location in real time, where the bus actually is. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute here, where their son or daughter is. And they can really plan. Oh, the bus is 20 minutes late. I can, instead of sitting at the bus stop for 20 minutes, I can stay at home a little longer, what have you. The district will also have a record of all bus activity, including travel time, speeds, what the driver's doing, and the stops. All that's documented. In addition to the daily bus runs, we also will have the ability to provide after-school activity locations. In other words, those invites would go out for perhaps maybe it's a high school baseball team, and you send that out, and all the families would know when that bus is going to arrive back after the game. So as an example. So the app for a smartphone, parents would be invited for a particular bus run for their child. And the app's secure. It takes a parent login. And once again, not everybody can get onto that app. So it's very secure. So this is a typical kind of a look-see at what, I know it's a little bit maybe hard to see, but what a bus run would look like. So the red square circumference, basically the bus route. The yellow are the stops that have not been picked up or attended to. Once it gets to, the bus makes that stop, it turns green. So you can see where the bus has traveled, and the blue is where it's headed. And once again, it gives you, on the right, you'll see the ETA when the bus is expected to arrive at the final destination. So once again, I kind of went over that
Dr.
part.
Sandy, just one question.
Sure.
You mentioned, some of the problems we're running into are when we're combining runs.
Yes.
And that may happen dynamically on a given day. Does it somehow, how do we, I can see how this would work if everybody's on the same bus every day, same
Yeah.
route, nothing changes.
Sure.
What if we're combining runs?
So what
routes are gonna
basically,
change
what Mr. Zeeler would do is, if bus 34 is now bus 15, he plugs that in that day.
Okay.
And that bus automatically is into that route. So the other thing too that I mentioned, we start out with a GPS recommended route, but that's not necessarily the way we travel, because oftentimes GPS has you turn around and so forth. And buses, as you know, they're not really to back up and turn around. They're supposed to go one way and make it fluid. So once we run that bus run a couple times, that becomes the bus route, and that gets placed in the system. So anytime there's a change, Scott would put that in that time, that day, and those would show the difference. So it would be fluid. It wouldn't be I got to change. I got to know my bus is now being substituted, so the app's no longer working for that day. No, it would work.
Okay, so it sounds like the way it works is the parents are invited to a route,
Yes,
but the bus could differ every day.
correct.
Okay, so the parents are really assigned the route.
The route, yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yes, yes. So the number of the bus is not necessarily the big point. The fact is where the bus is heading, all the pickups. And of course, as you know, when we have a substitute driver, when we have another person doing a double run or what have you, those times will vary. So it's really no way to show that bus is always going to be on time. And once again, with the bus driver shortage and the COVID knocking people out, those things have really been impacted. So let me talk to you about a couple additional features I think that's pretty interesting. So beyond the fact that the parents can go on their smartphone, or you can even log in on a computer, you'll also, Scott will have the ability to send out a message. He can send a message out. For example, we've often had breakdowns. We've had minor, little accidents that, Mr. Cromie scrambling to send out a letter. Well, Mr. Zeeler can send out a message right away. With a couple clicks, that message will go out to every parent or guardian on that bus route, and they'll know almost immediately the bus is, has a flat tire, and it's going to be delayed for whatever amount of time. So that's a nice little feature that beyond the fact that the parent sees, oh wait, the bus is not moving. Why isn't it moving? Scott can send out a message. Also, the safety feature on the map enables the family to really see that individual bus, and as bus where says, like they're sitting next to the driver. So you're not going to see all the buses. You're just going to see your child's bus. And that's another piece that's based on, security and safety for your child. So the parents, once again, they'll have to upload the app from the App Store, Google Play, or Basically, Busware would send them a notice to create an account. It's pretty simple. Now, of course, we did review several companies, and Busware was the lowest in cost, but it's significant cost. It's around $31,000, and it's for the full year, and the contract is not a multi-year contract. So in other words, we can really discontinue the service at any time. It's not a full contract with multiple years or anything of that nature. The closest competitor was over $50,000, and they wanted us to change our software, and that's part of why Busware is more applicable to what we want to do.
So are there any upfront hardware costs we have to invest in?
That cost includes all the GPS hardware that goes on the bus. That's the total cost for everything.
Okay, so that equipment is leased then, so we don't have an upfront cost.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's provided, and if we discontinue service, we have to send the equipment back.
Yeah, okay.
Just as a clarification question, I basically think I'm asking the same question that Mr. Christensen said, but just want to make sure I fully understand. So a parent would be assigned, say, bus route 4 for their kid, and say normally that would be bus 15 that would cover it. Someday bus 34 covers it instead. Basically, all that would be done was the GPS assigned to that specific route 4 would be swapped. The parent would still have the same
Yeah.
bus route, and that's all that it would take.
It's a quick swap with the bus, and then the parents, I mean, they're going to see the same bus. The number's going to be different.
Okay.
And Scott can also send out a message, hey, bus 44 is bus 15 for today.
Right, and that was going to be my follow-up
You can
question.
send that out
How would
as-
the parents know to make sure that it was the right
Sure.
bus? But that
So,
makes sense.
so look for bus 15 instead of 44 today.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Dr. Ginsani, in this Busware, is there any features if the bus were to go off its route significantly,
You're going to see it.
you're going to get alerted?
You'll see where the bus is.
So-
So the normal track of where that bus goes is highlighted.
Right.
And so if that bus deviates, Scott will know it, the parents will know it, everybody will know. If that bus is off route, went the wrong way or what have you, you'll be able to see it. It's live.
Thank you.
Dr. Janseni, quick question. Will this software enable us to eliminate the orange cards at the very beginning of the year that assign, like we get the bus
Yeah.
assignments via the cards?
I don't know, that's a tough one. Scott loves the orange card. I don't know if I didn't talk with Scott about that, but that may be a negotiation piece with Scott. Yeah. He loves the orange card.
Our orange cards were wrong every year.
Well,
We can
you'll
eliminate
get
that.
the app invite, so hopefully that'll be correct.
We'll take care
That's if, the board desires for us to make this leap. It is significant cost, but I think it will provide the families really a peace of mind, but also they'll be able to plan better with knowing where the bus is.
So I've actually had a number of parents in my neighborhood come up and, a number of elementary parents, because they're the ones that end up suffering the most
Yes.
because they're the last run. And yeah, some of them were standing out there a half an hour
Yeah.
waiting for the bus, and there was no communication because, like from Franklin, we're only like a 2-minute drive away. So by the time they would have gotten a call, by the time they would have known at Franklin the bus was there and what time to expect it, the bus would already be there at the stop. So
And as I mentioned earlier, we do have at times, a minor fender bender, a bus is out of commission, something's not working right. By the time Mr. Cromie, gets things rolling, it could be a significant amount of time. Scott can put that out there almost immediately, and it'll go right to all the families on that bus.
And from an elementary parent that's bus hasn't run on time most of the year. I don't know how many phone calls I've gotten from either Memorial School or from the bus garage saying, bus 19. So I'm right there with those parents. But again, just to have it on the app and say, okay, it's running 20 minutes late, so you don't even have to send your child out to the bus stop. Or if you get to
That's
the
another
bus
great
stop.
point for
And you
pickup.
have, parents don't go anywhere without their phones when you go to the bus stop. So you're looking at the phone going, oh, we can, you know, you can sit in the car or whatever else because there is a time lapse issue. But to your point, by the time we got the call out, the parents were either already at the bus stop and they figured out it was running late just by time or whatever else. So I think the app, again, from a parent whose child's bus was combined from the beginning and all that kind of stuff, I think it will work.
It will essentially eliminate that 20-minute window. You know, in the past, we've always told students to be there 10 minutes early and then wait 10 minutes after the estimated, pickup time. So that 20-minute window will really go away for families.
Especially wintertime.
Yes.
That's a big concern.
It's a safety, it is a safety issue as well.
And it's a huge safety issue for those parents that are dropping off and going to work. Like the bus is supposed to be coming down the street. I'm dropping my kid at the corner and going on to work. So I think it'll alleviate a whole lot of.
Yes.
So my view, I don't know what, I imagine you're looking for direction to put it on the agenda
For next week, yes.
next week to vote. But, my view is that, it's extra money, but I think we're going to be dealing with this bus driver shortage through the next year. If we can get to the point where we have, reliable, bus runs and kind of get back to where we were. I mean, I think 5 years ago, it probably wouldn't have been, it would have been a nice luxury, but it wouldn't have
Not
been
a
needed. But I
necessity.
think right now, when we're dealing with so many bus driver shortages, I think it'll continue that, it seems like a reasonable expense to make to, give our parents some visibility into, when the bus is going to arrive. Is it running late? Where's their kid at?
Yes.
You keep in
Dr.
mind-
J? Dr. J, it's Sharon.
Hey, Sharon.
I have 3 questions. Will this also be able to handle our runs to out-of-district placements, special education, charter schools?
For
private
every
schools?
bus, the cost, why it's a little bit substantial, is that we have about 60 buses that would have this GPS mechanism on it. So, yes, it's for every run,
Okay.
whether it's
Great.
in district or out of district. If we go down
Great.
to Pittsburgh to drop off, that run will be shown.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it can handle, I think you said, reroutes. I live in a neighborhood with very steep hills, so on occasion, the bus is not able to come to the neighborhood and the kids have to go to the neighborhood next door. So I'm assuming with a click, that message can get out so they're not trying to chase the bus down an icy road.
Sure, impassable road, we might send out a quick message saying that your normal bus stop is now going to have to be here because we can't get up this impassable road.
Great. And my last question is there the ability to allow older students to access that app themselves? Or could a parent do multiple? I'm thinking of high school and junior high kids who are leaving for school on their own. Their parent has already left. You know what I mean?
That's a great question. You know how it works. The parent or guardian is really the person in charge of that piece. So if the parent wants to share it with their middle schooler, here's the login, here's how to follow the bus, that's up to the parent. But really, the invite is the parent or guardian, not to other students.
Okay. I just didn't know some apps like that only would allow you to use one login per, you can only have it on one device or something. And that might come up even for parents who share custody or, that kind of thing. There might be multiple people using one parental login. So I guess that's the only
Both
unanswered
sets
question I
would
have.
have access to the bus run. Both,
Okay.
both, if the families are separated, both families would get on the list.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. It sounds great.
Yes, thank you.
Doug, did you already anticipate these costs in your calculations that the board saw tonight?
They're in the budget.
Thank you.
You're really thinking ahead. You're thinking ahead, yeah. Okay, anything else on that topic? We'll put it on the agenda for next week then.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Yeah, thank you. That was good, both of you. Next topic, any public comments on agenda items? Any call-ins?
No Collins.
Anyone from the extensive audience here? No? Okay, let's go move on to the committee reports. Personnel Committee, Darren, do you want to walk us through your items for next week?
Yes, there are 11 items here. I'll read them. Acceptance of resignations. Number 2, appointment of personnel. Number 3, involuntary transfers. Number 4, change of assignment. Number 5, approval of staffing changes. Number 6, approval of unpaid leave of absence. Number 7, approval of job description. 8, approval of administration tuition reimbursement. 9, approval of classified tuition reimbursement. 10, approval of extended school year staffing. And 11, appointment of board treasurer.
There was a resignation for a IMS math teacher. Is that one being filled, or is that one of those that you showed in the budget that was removed, or where is that one at?
Well, I guess it'll depend on the outcome of a
Curriculum committee?
curriculum committee
Yeah,
decision.
okay.
It won't be replaced at IMS.
Okay. Okay.
And I noticed also 2 more bus drivers were done. So any on the plus side?
No plus side right now. So we're going to have to definitely do something in regards to maybe something over the summer, some type of fair, something more incentives. Yeah, because we're probably down around 8 now. We were around 6, 5, so we're probably right around 8.
And again, we're all aware they're just not there versus they're going to other districts. I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, this is state and nationwide. I mean, it's just not Bethel Park.
So we have to do something to entice the few that are interested in bus driving.
That's correct.
In South Hills.
Could you remind us of the current bus driver salary that we're offering?
So as of right now, it's $18.93 currently. I'm not quite sure what the contract is for next year. Usually goes up about 1.5% to 2.5%, somewhere around there.
Okay.
You might
'Cause
have it.
I do know Peters offers something around $23 an hour. So, you know, if it's me and I'm looking at, do I want a bus driver position and I'm in the area, I'm going to probably pick the one that's $5 an hour higher.
And we have to factor in, some are off, we're offering benefits.
So, yeah, right now we offer single benefits for the bus staff.
Right, and I don't know the full
That's
benefit
I think
package.
some of the
That all
districts-
factors in,
yeah.
but just putting it out there.
Now, does start and stop times affect our bus routes? Is there a way to manipulate our start and stop times to accommodate the fact that we're down 8 drivers?
I don't think so, just because it's contract related. It's something that's in the CBA right now, start times and end times for teachers.
Well, I'm thinking about, combining routes and things like that Dr. Jansani was talking about earlier.
Starting salary for bus drivers next year is 20.02.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any of these items that people want held out and voted on separately?
It's Sharon. I don't want anything held out, but I was wondering if Dr. Walsh maybe or administration could talk about number 7, the job description for department chair facilitator. And are those positions, I'm assuming, are already filled and we're updating them, or are we looking for new folks, or what exactly is happening with that?
So with the adoption of a new CBA, there are some significant changes to the curriculum process, curriculum review, curriculum writing, and we also made some substantial changes to the department chair responsibilities and the scope of the department chairs. So it was necessary for us to revise that job description to include all of the new processes and the role that the facilitator will play in those new processes. And Further, we have to re-advertise or repost this for new positions, for new interested people to apply for department facilitator positions. So tonight you get a look at it and then move it next week for approval, and we'll post, and hopefully by June, at the June meeting, we can approve all the facilitator positions for next year.
Thank you so much. It looks wonderful. I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you.
It really does. If there was a job description is in place for a long time, we haven't ever looked at it. Was there one before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, any requests to hold any of these out separately next week? Okay, we'll move these all to the consent agenda. Do we expect anything to be added, any topics in this area?
You never know with
Never know,
personnel.
right.
Something could we'll certainly have potential new resignations, new positions, hires.
Sure.
Bus drivers pouring in the door to take the job. We'll have to just to
Right.
keep our fingers and toes crossed that happens.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Dr. Walsh?
Uh,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, we'll also be hiring this summer school employees for the summer programming. That motion will be on the agenda too, once we get our final counts for this summer, the students who are taking part in our summer programming.
Is that for the extended school year staffing?
No, this will just be for the summer of learning for our K-8 students in Bethel Park. So we're just finalizing our numbers from our parents right now.
Okay.
The extended school year service is something that the special education department runs.
Okay.
And the majority of the staffing is on for this agenda. There was a holdout about 5 individuals, and some of them I have already filled, but it was too late to add to the agenda. They'll be added on the next one.
Okay. So for the summer of learning, we should add that as a separate item. So under Personnel Committee, since we haven't looked at it and discussed it, we should add that as a separate item under Personnel for next week.
It's Sharon. Ms. Wells, just so the public understands, excuse me, the Summer of Learning, is that by district invitation to
Yes.
students who may catch up? Okay.
Yes, we are using the MAP assessment, and so invitations went out to families of students in the K-8 in math and ELA based on a MAP score.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Dan, you want to walk us through finance?
Yep, we've got 17 items tonight under the Finance Committee agenda. Number 1, May 2022, salaries and bills. 2, aid budgetary transfers. 4, approval of Steele Center for career and technical education budgets. 5, waive of facility rental fees. 6, renewing of the food service contract. 7, approval of student services contracts. 8, agreement with Lois Johnson Learning and Child Care Center Incorporated. 9, payment for Independence Middle School Phase 1 renovations. 10, approval of frontline education proposal. 11, Harris School Solutions web hosting migration. 12, acceptance of Rotary Club of Upper St. Clair Bethel Park grant. 13, lease agreement with First American Equipment Finance. 14, payment for Independence Middle School Phase 1 renovations. 15, payment for Independence Middle School Phase 2 renovations. 16, payment for waterproofing repair. And 17, adopt 2022-2023 proposed final general fund operating budget. Does anyone have any questions about any of those items?
No, I'd just say, Barry, we probably need to hold out 17.
Yeah, I mean, we can hold that out, yeah, if you want. Just the budget
Number
17, just hold out.
Just hold it out.
Vote on the proposed general fund operating budget separately. I mean, it's not going to be the final one. It's going to be the second of the final vote, but
Right,
we can
but it
do
could
it
change
separately.
from this week to
Sure.
next week.
Yeah. The food service contract 6, does that already, I noticed that there's a projected 20% increase. Does that include all of the costs that we were talking about before? You know, the inflationary cost increases?
Yes, it does. I thought Sharon was down there, was going to answer. I'm sorry.
If you could check with Sharon and Joe,
We'll
it's
double check it,
different.
but
The
I'm-
costs are different than what they're here, because we told them to, you know, absorb those inflationary
Right.
costs. If they're different, pull it out And we'll
Okay.
vote on it separately?
We can do that.
Same, just included in the consent agenda?
Are you asking if it's the same as what they just proposed?
Yeah.
It is, yes. Just cross-referencing their
Okay.
PowerPoint here, yeah.
Okay.
So this would include the 20-cent increase.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Any other questions, anyone?
The Harris School solution, so this, moving to a web or SaaS-based solution for ProSoft, is that going to have like a cost offset in other areas? Like, we don't have to run it on a server or something like that, or?
Right. We won't have to have the server that runs the software now. They'll be responsible for the security for that. And it also gives us a lot more flexibility if people need to access remotely, that they have more flexibility to do that.
Perfect.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Does it make it easier to submit budgets to the state? Does this tie in with the state?
Doesn't really change that a lot. I think, down the road, I will say ProSoft is an older financial software. There certainly are newer ones out there, but given everything that's going on in the district right now, it is not something that we wanted to engage in, considering at this time switching that out. So.
Okay.
Anything else from anyone? All right.
Will the busware, will that be added to this then, or I guess we'll add that separately as a separate
That'll be a
item,
separate
not
item.
under consent agenda.
I did also want to mention the frontline education proposal, just so you're aware, because we're going to web hosting with ProSoft, we need to change our time clock system, which is something we wanted to do anyway. So that's what the frontline education system switch is. We're going to be using their time clock system, which ties into our absent tracking and our HR system that we already use. So it'll bring it all under one umbrella.
So with this one, we're saying it's 24.5, that's an annual cost? And is it offsetting some other cost? Like, are we not paying for something else? Is this a shift?
We won't
or
be
is it-
paying for the time clock portion of the ProSoft program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All good from everyone? All right. I just wanted to thank the Rotary for the grant they provided for our co-op shop class. It was very generous of them. And I'll move items 1 through 16 to the consent agenda for next week, and then we'll hold out 17 as a separate voting item.
Good. Okay, policy.
Okay, I'm going to move 1 and 2 without any objections to the consent agenda for the next week. For the third and final reading, it's the trauma-informed approach in 146.1, and the revisions to the student discipline 218, 220 student expression and dismemoriation of materials, controlled substance and paraphernalia 227, food services 808, and volunteers 916. And then
Okay.
for first reading tonight is number 237, electronic devices. Dr. Walsh, Mrs. Zundel and I had met on this, and we needed to update our electronic devices policy. It was lacking in a lot of ways, so it was updated to meet today's standards.
Any questions on policies? Okay. Under other, since we don't discuss and debate the student agreements, can we just move those to the consent agenda also? Okay. Great, so that wraps up the committee part. Any public comments?
No calls.
None? Okay. Any board comments? No? Quiet group tonight. You must want to get home and watch the election results or something. Okay, motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.